In the last 20 years, cheap guitars have improved a lot more than expensive guitars have. Do you know why? The answer is pretty fascinating, actually. I mean, let's face it. Expensive guitars don't need to get better. They just need to stay the same. So, well, is that really true? Do you think that a $500 guitar now is better than a $1,000 guitar 20 years ago? Let's dive into this because this is very interesting. In order to understand this, and you might not think there's a whole lot to understand, but I think cheap guitars versus expensive guitars is one of those age-old arguments, right? But to really understand this, one of the things we need to realize is that cheap guitars didn't always exist. Back in the day, there were just guitars. There were Les Pauls, Strats, right? Jaguars, Jazzmasters, SGs, and that was that. And they were actually a premium product. There wasn't a budget version. It was just the Les Paul, the Stratocaster. So there weren't grades, there weren't levels, there weren't price levels really. Now we did have, like the Junior and stuff, but when we're talking about this right here, like the Les Paul, there was really only one. So why did that change? Rock music got basically Elvis Presley, the Beatles. More people wanted to play guitar. There had to be some sort of budget option. But it wasn't Gibson and Fender and Martin and the premium brands' ideas to do this. It was actually probably some other companies, such as Japan, all the companies in Japan. Taisco, for example, right? And they made, and there was Harmony, there was all these other brands that made student-grade entry-level guitars. But the problem is they were kind of like, they were sort of more or less department store guitars. So like a Harmony or, Dan Electro, any of that kind of stuff, they were $30 guitars that you bought at Sears Roebuck, right, out of a catalog. So they were not representations of the regular brand until Japan came along and said, you know what, we're going to build more economical guitars that people will be able to afford. The thing is, those weren't really that great at first either. And then the 70s happened. Yeah, companies like Ibanez and Tokai doing things like this. It was the first time you get in a situation where you have the legacy brand, Gibson, being copied by another brand. And of course, we could get into the lawsuit, not lawsuit argument of the 70s and who made the better guitar and all that kind of stuff in the 70s, but there was a wake-up call to the big brands to say, wait a minute, they're making copies of our real brand. I wonder if we should do this and get in on this action of having a cheaper alternative to our own guitars. So then, in the early 80s, Gibson and Fender and many of the other brands basically started with Japanese, pretty much, they started in Japan. So, like the Fujijin factory and early Epiphone Japan, all that kind of stuff, started making foreign made, cheaper to make guitars, copies of their own self. So, an Epiphone Les Paul, the Squier Stratocaster from the early 80s. I have a made in Japan Stratocaster that's pretty freaking awesome. But here's the thing. Those guitars were still, there was a big delta between those guitars and the legacy brand. I mean, let's face it. 50 years has gone by since then. Over those years, an evolution happened. So you had Japan, then Korea, then Indonesia, China, and all of those areas of the world just kept getting better and better and better and better at making guitars, and they're making them by the millions. Now, you look at an Indonesian-made Stratocaster like this that costs 500 and what is it, $550 or something you can get these for, and this guitar is fantastic. I'll leave a link to it in the description. It's really good. Now this one's been updated and modded by us. You know, we've got our custom pickguard on there, and we've got some of our Stratocaster and humbucker pickups in it and stuff. We've done some fun stuff with this. It's a project guitar for the channel. But the bottom line is, for $550, you can have a really, really nice guitar now. And the quality of this instrument is fantastic. This is really just a result of the fact that cheap guitars have been a benefit of that learning curve of those factories that make less expensive guitars over the years. And it was steep, 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 steep at first, right? So they were bad, 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 better, 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 and now they're fantastic. So let's talk about kind of the diminishing returns curve of the cheap guitar to the expensive guitar. So you have the $200 to $300 guitars. You have the stuff that you can buy on Amazon. You have the really inexpensive import stuff, which those are kind of like a placeholder instrument that is basically like a guitar-shaped thing that does guitar things. But that's really all you can expect from it. So that diminishing returns thing's pretty steep right there. You can go from $200 to $300 to $500 and get a lot better guitar. From $500 or so to about $1,500, same thing, very steep curve. Then you can get into, like for example, if you live in the United States, it might be important to you, but an American-made guitar that is made with better materials, better fretwork, better actual fret materials. So we're talking about the metallurgy, the bridges and the machines, the tuning machines and all that stuff is a lot better. And then from $1,500 to $2,500 or $3,000, it's about the same. It kind of depends on the brand. So, Gibsons are going to be up closer to $2,500 to $3,000. But those guitars, same thing, kind of pretty steep. They keep getting better and better and better, and the finishes get fancier and that kind of stuff. So they're still made by people in a factory here in the United States, and it's pretty good. Once you get above that, it starts to level out pretty quick, right? After $2,500, it starts to level out pretty quick, and then after that point, what are you getting? You're getting appointments, right? You're getting nice things on a guitar that maybe they're not necessary to the tone. Everybody wants to say, well, that has nothing to do with the tone, so why would I pay for it? But it's nice. It's cool. Like, things can be cool, and you can like them, right? So, well, let me grab that other guitar real quick. In the $3,000 range, you get a nitrous cellulose finish. You get a really nice figured maple top. Does that matter? No, but it's pretty. This one is got a rosewood fretboard. It's got a bound fretboard, with the little Gibson nubs, and it's got all the things that make a cool guitar cool. It comes with a really nice case, and it smells nice, and there's an experience to this guitar, of course, and it's nice, but those things don't mean as much as a lot of the features. To some people, I like them, but to some people it doesn't mean as much as those things at the bottom of the curve, where we're really making strides from $300 to $500 to $1,500 in the actual materials and the setup and the attention of the actual guitar build itself. At this end of this price spectrum, it kind of just starting to flatten off those diminishing returns. So we talked about cheap guitars. Let's talk about this expensive guitar in this context. Why haven't these guitars gotten better? Because they're the standard. So they didn't need to get better. Now, of course, we could talk about quality control, and we could talk about, for example, Gibson was a victim of this, and in the last 10 or 15 years, and I believe that Fender is going through this now, where when you have a change of ownership, you have a change of company ethos, a company can go through ups and downs of how much importance they give to quote-unquote quality control and those sorts of things. So you could look at various eras of the premier brands being better or worse based on who owned them, how much attention they were given to quality and that kind of stuff. But on the whole, they were the standard. This is the Les Paul standard, right? Well, this is you know what I mean. The standard Telecaster, not that one, but I mean the American one, right? The Telecaster, the Stratocaster, the SG, these were the standards. They were made that way from the beginning. The processes were the same, the finishes were the same, the Now, the efficiency of manufacture may have gotten a little bit better. They may have figured out how to make more in less time, like that kind of thing. But the overall processes, even the way they bind them, the way they finish them, all that kind of stuff is largely the same, right? Now, like I said, maybe a little more automated, but the result is largely the same. They didn't need to, they didn't need to basically like completely improve everything, just the manufacturing itself. The guitar didn't need to improve. It's the same. All of those other guitars, the cheaper ones, needed to improve because they were learning how to make a cheap guitar. Inexpensive guitars, are they bad? No. In fact, I think everybody should have one. I am very grateful for the fact that we have a $500 guitar, a $300 guitar, an $800 guitar, right? A $1,000 guitar. It's very, very important that we have all of those price points. Sometimes it can be confusing. Fender makes this very confusing, right? But sometimes it's a little confusing, but just buy the best guitar you can and buy the thing that you like. Do you like this kind of finish? You got to pay a little more for it? Who cares? Do you like a very basic guitar that you don't have to spend a lot of money for? Awesome. Doesn't matter. We just want you to play. Now here's the question. If you have a $300, a $500, or an $800 guitar, what is even the point of these legacy brands anymore? Because you'll hear people say they're just resting on their laurels and they're not doing anything. Well, duh, they don't need to, right? My buddy always says that Fender's biggest competition is old Fenders, right? So this guitar is what it is. It doesn't need to get better. It's awesome. So why do we even want this or need this? Practically, features, materials, finishes, and the finer things that some people like. Now, it might not be worth it to you. It's worth it to me. It might be worth it to some of you in the comments. If you have one of these premier brands, let me know what your favorite feature is in the comments. Let me know why you paid a little extra. The other thing is the legacy matters. There's a lot of intangible things that matter to some folks. Like to me, I want the real thing, right? I want the story. I want the guitar that's been around since the 50s. I want the brand, the history, all the things surrounding it because I'm a history guy. I like that. I like to know the story where the guitar came from, right? If it just pops out of a company that makes a copy, it just doesn't mean as much to me and it's not as inspiring. Now that might not be the same for you. You might enjoy just the function of that guitar and that's totally fine and I respect that. But I like the story. I think it's cool. And so sometimes you have to pay for that. After all this, what does any of this matter? Well, the real thing is we're living in the best time to own a guitar. You might feel that that guitars are getting too expensive because economics, that's a thing. We can't really control that a whole lot, right? So you might feel that stuff's getting too expensive. You might feel that even inexpensive guitars are getting too expensive. Here's what I'll say though. Inexpensive instruments are the best they've ever been. There has never been a better time in history to start playing guitar. Get in the comments and tell me, do you think that a $500 guitar is quote unquote just as good as a $3,000 guitar for you? Or do you appreciate some of those finer things that cost a little bit more? Do you care about the story of where the guitar came from, who made it, the history of the company, all those sorts of things? Maybe it's the musician, right? This is a slash signature, and in our house, we care about that. So, do you? Let me know in the comments what is important to you. I'm very curious about this. Do me a favor and like and subscribe if you like guitar stuff. Get in the chat and talk about this. I think it is really a constructive conversation to have if we look at it where we are in history and how encouraging it is for us to have inexpensive guitars and expensive ones. Tomorrow on our podcast, we're going to talk about something a little bit extension of this, and that is, I think that people don't actually want cheap guitars. They want expensive ones. I'll see you tomorrow.